In the later years of the Cold War, the economy of the USSR was improving at about half the rate of the United States, and there was a bit of civil unrest caused by government intransparency and a lack of goods for the people. On top of that bundle of goodness, there was no clear leadership, as the last two general secretaries of the country had died of old age and the stress of the job, which, to be fair, there was probably a lot of. Because of these sudden deaths, the Kremlin had turned from a symbol of the power of the Soviet Union into what was essentially a glorified funeral home for these, actually really powerful men. And as more time was spent on funerals, less time was spent on actually running the country, meaning that the problems that they were trying to fix for the very brief time they were in office continued to get worse and worse. Eventually, after the second one died, they realized that it might be better to get a younger guy because he might live long enough to actually solve the problems. And to that measure, a young politician named Mikhail Gorbachev was brought in. Um, Gorbachev was notable for many things, including a really cool birthmark on the top of his head and being the first general secretary to have been born after the Soviet Revolution. People hoped that he would not die long enough to fix the actually pretty major problems the Soviet Union was facing at this time. And, he kind of succeeded, 50-50, 50%. To attempt to solve the problems, he proposed some newfangled philosophies of government that he hoped would help both the economy and the government. These ideas boiled down to two basic concepts: glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring. Perestroika, or openness, was a dramatic restructuring of the economy and a bit of restructuring of the government. The idea was that there would be more freedom in the market so that it would incentivize people to make their own small businesses and attempt to work harder, much in the same way that capitalism works in the United States now. Another thing that they attempted to do was to decentralize, meaning that the different parts of the Soviet Union would create what they wanted and it would improve efficiency and reduce waste. As you saw earlier, it kind of said failure a little bit, and that's because by decentralizing and allowing a free market structure, the government lost control over the economy, and people stopped paying taxes, which meant that the government was unable to give money back to places that had lower incomes. Um, and around the time that perestroika was implemented, that dramatic dip that you just saw in the graph occurred. Glasnost was the idea that government should be conducted more out in the open. This was achieved by decensoring many books, and a greater degree of freedom was allowed in the media. Through this, there was a dramatic increase in criticisms of the government because the media was allowed to actually report what was happening in the country. This also did not have the desired effect, to put it mildly, although it had the same good intentions as perestroika. The end result of all these dramatic, neither policy worked, and when put together, they worked even less and kind of fed into each other. So the negative economics effects of perestroika were complained about more freely because of the increased freedom of speech of glasnost, and it was a repeating cycle. All of this dissatisfaction with the government culminated in the August coup, which occurred in August of 1991, in which some more traditional communists tried to take back the government from Gorbachev. This was successful, kind of. They ended up returning the government to Gorbachev after a little while, but then he declared that he was resigning and the Soviet Union was officially disbanded. Naturally, because Gorbachev, through his policies of glasnost and perestroika, almost single-handedly ended this Cold War by driving the Soviet Union to ruin, the Western world loves him. He was awarded the 1990 Nobel Peace Prize. He continues to be remembered fondly in the Western world, and his presence here can best be summed up by a Louis Vuitton ad in which he models.